In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Today's guest is a transformative technology leader who spent his career helping tech companies evolve their products and services through periods of major change and reinvention. He's held pivotal roles leading product and strategy teams at companies including Veritas, Cohesity, Puppet, and Dell EMC. He's known for evolving technical, complex solutions into clear customer-ready offerings and brings both technical depth and strategic clarity to his work. Today, he's the Chief Product Officer at Arctera, a data management company that helps enterprises streamline compliance, resilience, and data lifecycle governance. Matt Waxman, welcome to the show.
Hey, Natalie. Thanks for having me.
I'm very glad to have you. And to kick things off today, I know you've been part of some pretty major transformations, both in smaller and larger companies. So when you think back on those experiences, what would you say is kind of the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned that shapes how you lead through change?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I'll try to give a fairly simple answer to it. I've seen transformations of all kind, transforming products, transforming strategy, transforming go-to-market, so on and so forth. I think there's one underlying theme that I found in all of them that sort of makes or breaks how successful they are. And this is the big lesson learned I've had. It's your culture. It's your people. If your culture supports the ability to take risk, experiment, it's okay to fail, those types of things, then I think you'll be far more successful in it. So, and then the second piece that I've always found as part of that is that generally people, I think it's human nature, get pretty comfortable doing what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time, maybe. They've been doing it a certain way during that time. And so as a leader, navigating a transformation, it may sound a little bit funny, but I think our role is actually making people feel uncomfortable in a very, politically correct way, HR safe way. But, that uncomfortableness is, can you push people to think differently, to move at a different speed or a different rate, to, think more deeply about problems, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we are in times of lots of change. And so I think everyone should be feeling a little less comfortable than maybe we were a number of years ago. Can you talk about how you do that? Any kind of strategies, tips? How do you get people to kind of move in that direction?
Yeah, for me, I'm a big believer in form follows function. So what I mean by that is you have to have alignment on your strategy. So like I said, there's all different strategies. There's no right or wrong, are you transforming to growth, so on and so forth. It takes time, I think, to get people to really align on what the strategic intent is. And you're not done at that point. You have to then get people on board with that, get them rallied, excited about the outcome, the possibility to counter the risk of being uncomfortable in those situations. So that's the function, if you will. And then the form to that is, okay, now you get your teams together, you get them organized, you put goals together, you start measuring those things, you start executing. But without that foundation, it's very hard for people to just execute, right? They don't know why.
Right. Well, and I think you just mentioned it, the discomfort plus excitement, like that combination, I think is, it sounds like the healthy driver for that change.
Yep.
Curious to hear how you've applied this in your current role, and maybe talk a little bit about spinning out Arctera, and would love to talk about, what that transformation has looked like.
Yeah. So let me share just a little bit about Arctera. So we like to think of ourselves as a turbocharged startup. We are founded in 2024. And we were founded on legendary products, as we like to think of them. So they're existing products with existing customers, great loyal customer base, world-renowned capabilities as part of those, but with new energy, with new intent, with a new strategy as part of that, and a focused team that's building it. So, we oftentimes talk about it as these were products, if you will, and businesses that sort of lived in the shadows in the past. They were part of a larger company. Some people may know Veritas, which has been around for a long time as a software company, and sort of lived in the shadows there. And Arctera and this whole transformation has been taking them out of the shadows into the sunlight, applying a little fertilizer, watering them, and helping them grow. And so that comes to bear. And I know we'll talk more about this, but in obviously product and how we think about innovation and drive the experience for the customers in a new, fresh way, leveraging AI in how we work internally so that we're modernizing our practices, and also completely redoing the go-to-market motion and reimagining what that could be with new focus. So it's really touched every part of the company. That's why we talk about it as a turbocharged startup, because it's coming with existing products and customers, and it's now got this focus that's really going to push more air through the engine, if you will, in the turbocharge analogy.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I do think, anytime it's sort of a spin-off type of situation, you have something that exists to build from, and you have the opportunity to reimagine. I think about some of the client engagements that my team has led, and like each one looks a little bit different, but whether you have a big customer base and you're kind of bringing them through the journey, or if you have kind of product market fit in such a way that you wouldn't normally have at a startup, and right, just looking at what do you have as assets at your disposal, what do you need to keep moving, and then where is there the room to kind of reimagine and rebuild as a startup would.
Yeah, I think the pattern exists honestly at every stage of a company, right? Even early stage startups typically go through a pivot. What's a pivot? It's some sort of transformation. You may have a set of people who built, the first stage and were really tied to those ideas and that way of working. And that pivot means transforming to something different. So I think every stage of company, maturity of company, size of company have very similar patterns in that.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the sequencing? You were talking about the product, reimagining the go-to-market. What were kind of some of those early, kind of earliest components, and how did that kind of roll out over time?
Yeah, the starting point was basically, what is the objective for the company? What's the business metric that we're going to use? Growth rate oftentimes is the one that most companies will look at. But growth can be measured in many ways, right? Sometimes that's user growth. Sometimes that's revenue. Oftentimes it's revenue growth. It can be retention, those sorts of things. So it was really nailing down first, what are those key metrics? And by the way, it may seem like it's a very simple thing to do. Sometimes it's very difficult to really understand, okay, is it about growth within an existing install base, or is it about growth net new? With new logos, two very different investment profiles, two very different go-to-market motions that you need to create. So growth is an easy word to spell. It's a little bit harder to figure out, like, what do you really mean by growth? What's most important? Because they all have different cost profiles. So it really started with that, what is the hypothesis, if you will, and what are the founding measures? And then it's really about building the rest of the scaffolding around that. So, every company is slightly different. I've certainly been in product companies in the past. And so it tends to start with product, because if you don't have the right product, it doesn't matter how much you do in terms of downstream things. So you have to get your product strategy to basically support and align your company strategy in that way. And I think everything you wrap around that, you sort of build the rest of the plan that way. So that's the way we approached it.
Yeah. What about, I guess, within kind of the sales and marketing functions, did any kind of team or approaches carry through from kind of pre-spin-off, or was it kind of all built kind of from the ground up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe necessarily that clean slate is always the best way to do stuff. I think you want to take the best of what you've got and then figure out how to tweak and build upon it. So, our heritage was very customer oriented and being really close with our customers, and we certainly didn't want to lose that, in building a new go-to-market model. So we really looked at it as how do we accelerate what we were doing. And the key thesis there that has brought us growth has been focus. It's very simple, but the more that you can narrow down the things that you're doing, the ways that you interact with customers, how many touch points you have with a customer, all those types of things, the more you can make those conversations stick and really focus on the value and the outcome that a customer is trying to achieve, as opposed to just going to tell them, here's the latest feature, or, let me demo the technical aspects of a product, those sorts of things.
What was the kind of communication plan with existing customers, and how did you bring them through that journey?
Yeah, it's again going back to like high touch model. Like we've always been close with our customers, so we stayed close through the transformation, sharing with them, how we were thinking about it. We were just very transparent about it, and I think customers, in a lot of ways, you got to think about as being your partners. They're making a big investment in you, especially if you're a startup. They're taking some risk around that, and so they want to know who they're working with, who's the team behind that, and how they're thinking. So our approach has been very transparent. We tell our customers, here's how we're investing. Here's the things that we're focused on doing. By the way, there's some things that we may not be doing that we used to do before, and that builds a lot of trust, I think, with customers. And so they've ridden through the transformation with us quite well, and and grown nicely as part of that. So I'm a big believer in just be transparent. I worked in an open source company for a few years, and a big part of that is it's all about your community, and you can't have a community unless there's open, transparent communication. And I just think that's a great way to work these days.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. I'd love to talk, Matt, a bit about where you are today and shift gears a little bit into something that I think is impacting every business. You alluded to this earlier, and that's AI. And I know we were at a roundtable dinner together last night. There was some very lively and heated dialogue on a range of AI topics. Want to hear kind of your views on AI and how that's sort of impacting the areas of the business that you're involved in.
Yeah. I've been fortunate to have lived through several large periods, waves, however you want to think about them, in this business for a couple of decades. Cloud was a big transformative shift. Going to containers, was another one. Client server back in the day. There's been big transformational shifts. What's different to me with AI is it's not a technology shift. Those things all sort of work their way through IT into impacting how companies, built their platforms and their technology stacks and so on and so forth. AI is touching every part of every industry at every level, in every function, in every way. And so, in a lot of ways, I think about it more like the the revolution that happened around electricity. Right? Because electricity was that ubiquitous thing that just enabled so many things that no one could have imagined initially, and AI is the same way. So we have really been leaning in embracing a bunch of different AI technologies, but more importantly, trying to get the thinking to expand to how can you leverage tools. These are tools in the end, to improve productivity, to be an assistant, to accelerate some of the work that you did. One of my favorite phrases that I learned a while back was, how do you eliminate the soul crushing work, right? I think every job has some element of work that's mundane, repetitive, so forth. Can you eliminate some of that using AI and spend your time on the deep thinking that you need to do, right, to build a business, to grow a business, so on and so forth. So, yeah, we can start there, and then we can go much deeper into AI thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I like the soul, removing the soul crushing components. curious if you have any example use cases in the organization that have supported that sentiment.
Yeah, one of my favorites, I think like anything, oftentimes these sort of movements happen with a few people, like, a little beachhead that starts of people trying to experiment, and then it grows from there. So we've been fortunate to have someone in our design team who really has embraced like all in on AI. And one of the things that we learned through that, which was really mind blowing and shifting sort of this long, arduous project work that you do as around design into something that literally can be done in hours. So, the thumbnail on this is if you talk to designers, they will build out a hypothesis, they will do user research, they will take that to inform building some prototype level, that could be a mock-up, a wireframe, that sort of thing. They'll work with an engineering team to build it. They'll go take that to some customers and get some feedback. They'll tweak it, and hopefully they'll ship it. And then after you ship it, you find out typically months, quarters, sometimes a year later, did that actually work? Did it solve a customer's problem, right? So you take something that could be a year, 18 months in life cycle, and we've been able to really run that entire process through AI. And so from generating the personas of your customers, so that it reflects their needs and their wants and so on and so forth, to generating design, to then round tripping it back in to validate whether that design met the needs of the persona. And it has just completely changed the speed. I mean, this is one of those, it's not even 10x faster, it's 100x faster to do it this way. So I found that very exciting. And a lot of good lessons learned along the way. If you were to talk to this individual, they would tell you, the number of prompts that they've had to enter to get to that stage is close to 2,000. So it takes work, but there's a lot of learning in there that at least can be applied, going forward.
Yeah. Well, and I think, as you said, like it takes work to get it right. The impact and value is there once you do. And you can do that for so many small kind of components of anyone's role that really like around prioritizing kind of where do you make that investment? Where are you going to get the biggest lift? And I think that's part of why organizations need so many different people within the company working and thinking in this way, because there isn't kind of one person or one team that can really drive that throughout the business.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges we all face with AI is, one, obviously there's many different types of AI, but if we just talked about, Gen AI and what most people are using today as sort of end users in any of our roles, it's the blank screen problem. One of the beauties of pick your favorite Gen AI tool out there is they appear to be so simple. You go to the website and you're presented with a box, a text box to enter, a prompt into. So it appears very simple, but if you don't know where to start, you don't know the things that you could actually accomplish using that particular tool. So that's what I mean by the blank screen. It's like there's a tool there to use, but if you don't know what you want to do or what you could possibly do with it, then you're not harnessing the power of it. So there's a bit of a learning curve I think people all have to go through in, just asking, how can you help me today?
So talk more about that. Like how have you and the organization kind of brought the team along? Like how have you encouraged kind of playing around with the tools, driving new ideas? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, the culture, back to, what I said earlier, when it comes to transformation, I think is the biggest part of this. We basically focused on building a culture around a core set of values. They actually spell out the word focus in our values, and the F stands for fail forward as one of our core values. And what we mean by fail forward, because some people think about it as fail back or so forth, is that you want to experiment, And in order to experiment, you have to be able to embrace failure. And you need to be able to celebrate that. And if you do that, you will start iterating much, much faster. And you'll start moving much, much faster as a company, as a team, so forth. So the cultural values there are critical, I think, to get people to believe it's okay to put an hour on your calendar to experiment with AI. I think sometimes people feel like that's, well, I'm not doing my job then. I should I be doing that on my own time? Is that my learning? So on and so forth. I view it as that's part of how you are going to get better at doing the thing that you do. So you need to invest in that like you would invest in a meeting or reading a document or so forth. So I think all those things have to be supported by your cultural values, and you need to celebrate those values. I send out a weekly email to the entire company. In that email, I highlight, things that the team's doing, cool new AI tools that we discovered, someone discovered, or someone pointed me to. We do company town halls once a month, and we celebrate the company values there with a shout out to people. And the shout out includes which value, they upheld. So I think it's like any of these are people businesses, right? And so it's all about the culture that you establish.
Yeah. I think also depending on where a company is in their journey, like I'm thinking as you were talking, I was thinking back to my team's earlier days after kind of ChatGPT and the other tools launched. And we had like every week we had an education session, and different people on the team contributed based on areas of expertise. We had 90 minutes a week of that experimentation time, and that was the same time for everybody. We've evolved a lot since then because now a lot of that experimentation and kind of AI related initiatives are just part of kind of how we're operating. But I think figuring out what works for your organization and when do you, push something across the organization as a signal of, yes, we're not just saying, we want to experiment. We're giving you the time to do that and building it in.
Yeah. I know many companies because I talk to a lot of customers and peers in the industry. A lot of companies have to balance and there are genuine risks around using AI, right? Compliance and governance, legal risks with the potential benefits, productivity, so forth that you can get out of it. And what we found was initially we had a pretty strict set of rules in which we guided people to operate within. And that included not sharing, company intellectual property, sensitive information, those types of things. Because we hadn't really standardized yet on a set of tools that we could use. And we more recently decided on some core platforms that we're using. And part of those, they allow us to now put our own IP into those models in a protected way. And that was a step function difference in terms of the benefits you get, because you're not getting this sort of very helpful, but sort of, sanitized version of insights. You're actually using your data to get insights, to analyze it, to manipulate it, to do all sorts of things. And so that was a game changer for us, was being able to actually use our company data in a private way.
Yeah, that's definitely made a big impact for us as well in our work. I'm curious, Matt, if there's something that you're using like for your own day-to-day work, or maybe even on the personal side, like any use cases that you're particularly excited or energized by these days.
Yeah, a friend of mine recently shared that the CEO at his company ran a workshop where everyone had to take the day and build a startup using AI, and which would sound crazy even 2 years ago, right? And I thought that was a fantastic idea, and so I did the same myself. And I treated it as an experiment, as a learning experiment. And I was just blown away by what you can accomplish so quickly from ideating on a potential problem, articulating some customer pain points, thinking through that with a thought partner, using ChatGPT as a thought partner in that case, being able to build a design based off of that, a business plan, feed that into a design engine like Figma, has some great tools to be able to do this, develop a, sort of clickable prototype, if you will, and then take that and feed it into a code generation tool to actually build real code behind it. Tools like Lovable, great platform to be able to do that. And so that was scary, energizing, but mostly inspiring because it just gives you ideas of, okay, maybe you're not every day creating a new startup company, but in many ways you can apply those things to solving the problem of the day, because we all have that, right, going on. So I really just encourage everyone to kind of go through a similar experiment and try to learn it. And I think you'll probably be blown away, and it will influence the way you think going forward. So I think I started this year where ChatGPT was, a website I would open when I needed to in my browser, to it became a pinned tab in the browser, to now it's moved to my primary screen. It's not off on my secondary screen because I'm using it so frequently throughout the day. So, I think it's just like all interwoven with your work, the more that people embrace these things.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, like once you're able to put in kind of more kind of data and more context in, and it's already built in, like the value just continues to multiply because you're not providing like all the context of a prompt each time, and you have more of that kind of like already waiting there, ready for you.
Yeah. We've been able to, I'll share a story around the go-to-market side of things, because, a big part of our transformation has been the go-to-market, as we mentioned earlier. And we've had some folks who have built custom GPTs trained on our competitors, on our products, on pricing, on, a whole bunch of different data, and created sales coaches out of that to have our sellers be able to go through a very different experience when it comes to enablement and training and so forth, because they can sit and interact conversationally with a coach, right, that is trained on our actual sales plays and all the details behind them. So that's been pretty cool to see.
I love that. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing it. Hey, this is Natalie, your Shift and Thrive host. After chatting with lots of CEOs, one thing is crystal clear. Leveling up your company means having a killer go-to-market strategy. That's what my crew at Magnitude Consulting does every day. If you're trying to step up your marketing game, whether it's strategizing, accelerating your pipeline, expanding into new markets, or getting into AI and automation, let's talk. No pitch, no pressure, just good conversation. Visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com/Natalie to schedule a time. Can't wait to connect. Matt, I want to zoom out a bit. We're talking about transformations, and would love to hear about your customers and what kinds of transformations are they going through right now? And then, how does your organization work with them through that?
Yeah. So our company focuses on all things data management. And the way we think about that is there's a life cycle to your data. And throughout that life cycle, you need to be able to protect it. You need to be able to ensure that it's there, it's resilient to a variety of different things, whether they're natural disasters, cyber attacks, so forth. And how do you ensure that that data is compliant? Depending on what industry you're in, there's different regulatory requirements or just company requirements around that. So, not to overplay the AI piece, but all of that AI stuff that we're talking about plays directly into, so how do you ensure that your new AI application is protected? How do you ensure that the data that you're sharing into an AI, Gen AI tool is not breaking some compliance rule? It's not sharing sensitive information from your company or customer PII information in there. So Our conversations with our customers are much more now around, okay, now they're all building their AI infrastructure, their tools, their applications, so on and so forth. And they're facing the same problems that have always existed with any application. It's just, these new applications happen to be AI ones. So that's been a very active conversation with our customers, is helping them to, be able to scale their environment for all those apps. I oftentimes think about, agentic AI. And while some people will talk about it as replacing people, maybe it's not going to go that far, but still it will come a point for some companies where your agent becomes your subject matter expert, right? And so in the same way that if a person was out sick and you were trying to get something done and that person you weren't able to get in touch with, well, what happens if your agent is down, right? What happens if the system that's running your agent is not available? It's been attacked, cyber attack, right? So on and so forth. How are you going to run your company at that point? So agents are actually becoming the next mission critical application, if you will. And I don't think anyone has really been thinking about that because they're still in incubation stage. But that's a lot of what our customers are starting to think about, because they're typically large organizations who, minutes of downtime, seconds of downtime can cost hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in lost revenue or fees and penalties.
Yeah. And are you seeing any shifts in kind of where the interest is coming from, whether it's kind of earlier adopters, smaller versus larger companies, different roles within the organization that you're talking to?
I wouldn't say necessarily a shift, because I think back to these patterns and waves have happened before. It's followed a similar sort of pattern in that, you'll typically see parts of a large organization start to embrace, new things, new technologies, new platforms, new ways of working. That certainly repeating itself here. We see application development teams, that are starting to embrace these things more. I'd say that one of the big shifts with AI is that much of it is being driven actually top down as well. Because, everyone in the C-suite has been to every conference, every roundtable, every discussion, every webinar over the past 2 years, and it's AI, 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 right? So they're all looking at how to drive AI through their organization. In the past, like cloud, that would have been the CIO, right, was driving that in their organization. AI, the CFO, the chief risk officer, the chief revenue officer, they're all looking at how to leverage AI. So this is happening in a much more ubiquitous way, I think, than prior waves.
Yeah. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and your leadership. You've kind of alluded to some areas just as we're in the conversation, but talk a little bit about, what experiences have shaped, the way that you lead, and, has that changed over time?
Yeah. What, I think we've all take our lessons as we go through them, some of them good, some of them bad, but they're all lessons and learnings. So I really believe in situational leadership. And what I mean by that is it kind of goes back to where we started our conversation on a transformation. If you don't know what the situation is you're trying to solve for, a turnaround, a growth, a pivot, so on and so forth, it's very hard to lead with any credibility in there. So I think you very much have to tailor your leadership style and approach to the situation that you're trying to achieve. So if it's a turnaround, for example, you're going to have to lean in more on that, making people uncomfortable. Right? If it's a growth, it's going to be, you got to lean in more on basically clearing the path for people as much as possible so that they can just move as fast as humanly possible. So I think it's really important as a leader to adapt. You keep your values the same, your core values. You have your tool bag of things that you use, right, to lead teams and lead planning and so forth. But you pick up the tools and you use them sometimes in a different order, or you apply them with a different weighting, in one situation versus another. So for me, that's been an important part of my style that's evolved over time is, really understanding the situation and being open to adapting to it, not just bringing my playbook in and apply the playbook just because I did it before that way.
Yeah. I like too how you said kind of keeping the values consistent and then right like updating based on the situation. Curious to hear if you can share any of your core values and like also how did you come to define your own leadership values and have you noticed those changing at all or really have they kind of stood firm through time?
Yeah. I don't know if I have great wisdom and insight into this, so I'll just share my personal experience on it. Um, certainly some values I think are instilled in us from a very early age, based on, whoever your mentor, teacher, so forth was along the way. But I found that also some values I had maybe were not as apparent to me initially until I felt that they were crossed in some way.
Mm.
And then it heightened the awareness of, yeah, you know what? I actually believe very deeply in that. I just didn't realize it before. So I think my values were sort of formed in that way, sort of got stronger over time as I experienced different things. But, for me, it's as you can probably tell, very much about people, knowing that this is a people business. I believe in transparency. I believe in having fun because everyone is working hard enough doing these things. If you're not enjoying yourself, then you shouldn't be doing it. And fun comes in many ways. Fun comes in new projects that you get to try out, experimenting and learning, like we talked about before, growing into new roles and, doing some fun things as well outside the office or just the banter in a meeting. So I think that's very important. That's been a core part of me. And then integrity, I just think is the highest one overall. If you can't trust people to do the right thing and you compromise on those, I've seen too many things go wrong when that happens. It's best to just stick with high integrity decisions and just follow through on them. Accountability is really important when it comes to that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think as a lot of us go through our career, you realize that maybe there's values that you had from the beginning, but until something is kind of standing in the way of that, um, you haven't really had the chance to really have to make the hard choices of like, do you still live by this value? Do you have had to work through whatever the challenge is to go through that? Like I know for myself, like difficult conversations, like candor over comfort,
Hmm.
is one that I maybe always believed in, but until I was faced with a number of situations like that, you really see how you show up in those moments.
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree. Yeah.
So I want to get a little deeper on the go-to-market side of things.
Hmm.
And I know from prior conversations, we've talked about kind of product first mindset versus customer problem focus.
Hmm.
Can you talk about where you see organizations maybe can get stuck and kind of how should they be looking at developing that kind of customer problem orientation?
Yeah. Again, like I think so many of these companies, startups, and large companies start from a product, without unless you're a services company, right, or an operations company, you're a product company. And so typically that product gets formed through thinking about how you could solve a problem differently. And then you start applying, technologies and so forth to solve that problem. And so you're sort of ingrained with this thinking of, I can explain how this thing works really well because we built it, right? We were part of, seeding the idea, building it, and all the iterations that it took to get there. And so you're proud of that work and you want to explain to people how what you've built is different, is unique, is better, is faster, so on and so forth. And you're going to explain it through the how, through the technical details. But the thing that you miss is your customers in that case weren't part of that journey. And honestly, they care very little about that. What they care about is they've got a problem they're trying to solve for. And how are you going to help solve that problem for them? So I think oftentimes in technology companies, product companies, software, you name it, you tend to start with a very how-oriented conversation, a technical conversation, a bottoms-up conversation, however you want to think about it. And that can be a real impediment, I think, to driving growth, because the value that you create for a customer comes from the problems that you're solving from them. And the bigger that problem is for them, the stickier your solution will be, and that will lead to good things for your how stuff later. But get there when you need to get there. I think leading with it is problematic. It kind of comes back to the why, what, how, right? Just lead with the why.
Yeah. I know in the marketing side, obviously voice of the customer is so important. And I'm such a big proponent of sending marketers kind of out there into the world, go to conferences, interview your customers, shadow sales, all those different touch points to kind of hear directly and not only be taking, let's say, as you're talking about, like the product kind of features and capabilities and translating that. I'm curious on product teams that you've led. Are there any kind of avenues or tactics that you find really helps bring that forth?
I think any product or company that has an opportunity or has been doing SaaS has a huge advantage, because one of the things that SaaS provides is a far deeper intimacy with your customers. So if you're in a product team, traditionally non-SaaS, you build and ship a product that takes you a year and you don't get much in terms of feedback, how customers are actually using it, unless you go ask, like you're saying, so go ride along and so on and so forth. And that's, low volume, maybe high fidelity in those conversations. Whereas SaaS, you have instant access to how customers are using your service, your product, your platform, whether they like it or not. Whether they're, one of my favorite terms that I heard over the years was having rage clicks. They're clicking around in your product because they can't figure out how to do something, and that's a indicator that they're frustrated with it, right? You wouldn't know that if you were having to go get on a plane and visit, 5 customers over the course of 3 days. And maybe they would have given you that input if you were lucky. So I think SaaS is a huge advantage when it comes to getting real insights into what your users are doing. And I think one of the important distinctions that sometimes gets overlooked is your user and your buyer persona are oftentimes different people, and you need both inputs, right? So the ride along is great to get to the buyer, sometimes to the user. The product usage is your user feedback. It's not really your buyer feedback at that point, unless you're doing product-led growth and other fancy things.
Yeah. I like the rage click terminology. I think maybe another metric we can add in there is see how we can measure how hard somebody is banging on the keyboard and they're trying to get something done.
Yeah, there could be the laptop slam, which is I think the worst case, slam the screen closed in frustration.
Yep. I can say I'm definitely guilty of sometimes typing harder when I'm trying to get a point across, but it's falls on deaf ears, surprisingly. Matt, I know we're coming nearer to the end of our time. I've loved so much of what you've shared and want to ask you maybe a more introspective question, thinking about everything you've learned throughout your career. If you were sitting in a room with your younger self when you were just getting started, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I have learned over time that I think it's hard work, working hard over almost anything else. Have your core values, but what I would tell my younger self is don't sweat did you get the best grade? Did you go to the whatever it is, named school that you wanted to go to? Did you have, were you most popular in school or whatever in sport? whatever your ambition is in terms of what you want to accomplish, I really believe that 9 times out of 10, you can accomplish that if you just work hard at it. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen overnight. That working hard may take a long time to get there. But I would tell my younger self, it's all about hard work. And if you build that discipline early on, I think it carries you very, very well through your life and your career.
I love that. And that is very well said. So thank you for sharing that. And can you let listeners know if they want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Love to connect up that way. That's probably the best way. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do at Arctera, our website is arctera.io, and you can find us on various social platforms at that handle too.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Matt. This has been a really great conversation. I especially appreciated hearing the perspectives around, transformation, starting with making people just uncomfortable enough, and how that factors into a transformation, and how you and your other leaders have approached building a culture that supports that kind of shift.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Natalie. Great discussion. I enjoyed it as well. And it was nice to see you in person too at our roundtable.
Yes, for sure. Thank you. And thank you too to everyone listening. If today's conversation sparked something new for you, please pass it along to another leader. We know that insights and experiences like this fuel fresh thinking and really help all of us drive real transformation, both in our companies and in ourselves. So thanks again, Matt. And this has been another amazing conversation on Shift and Thrive. I'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.